Evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight to the Urban Growth Boundary Meeting for Southwest Basins 1 through 4. We've got, it's a hybrid meeting, so we have some people attending virtually. We also have a few people here in the audience. And I am going to go through some slides here. I would like to introduce some of the city staff that is here. My name is Andrew Orr. I work as a long-range planning supervisor for the city of Franklin. Brian Goodwin is here. You'll see him shortly. He works for the water management department. And also Jimmy Wiseman with the engineering department. He's our assistant director. Kelly Dannenfelser is the assistant director for the planning and sustainability department. She's here, as well as Eric Connor. And Annette Dalrymple is running support remotely for the Zoom part of the meeting. As I get through the end, I'm planning to take the in-person questions first, and then we'll get questions answered from those attending virtually on Zoom. Please use the chat feature when possible. It'll just kind of make it easier for me as I answer questions and can relay those questions to those in the audience as well. But if you feel compelled, you can ask your question audibly and we'll answer it. Please hold questions until the end. And, the purpose of today's meeting is to inform the community about the UGB update, ask questions, hear your comments, your concerns, and also to kind of learn more about the process and kind of where things are going from here. We do have some handouts for those that are here in person. We have little cards, they have a QR code on them. You can activate that with your camera on your phone. We have a short survey that we're asking everybody to take, and it's short. We also have printouts if you prefer to do that, but we're trying to get as many filled out online as possible. The link is listed on this page for those attending virtually. And one of the 4 questions on the survey is to provide your email address if you're comfortable doing that, so you can receive correspondence over the next few months. And all of this information and the recordings will be on the project webpage, franklintn.gov/UGB. Over the next 20 minutes or so, we'd like to cover a couple topics. I'll provide a quick overview of the growth plan, the Williamson County Growth Plan that's starting up. I'll run through a few slides that talk about some land use planning analysis, and then we'll share our recommendations for kind of each area. And then also Jimmy Wiseman from engineering will talk about some of the transportation implications, and Brian Goodwin will talk about sewer, which are 2 major pieces to the urban growth boundary discussion. And we'll close with next steps, another survey reminder, and then questions, comments. This is a map of the currently adopted Williamson County Growth Plan. It was put in place 20 years ago, and each municipality in Williamson County is shown in a color. Fairview, Brentwood, Nolensville, Franklin, Thompson Station, Spring Hill. Franklin's in the middle. We're in the gold. The tannish color that you see was the city limits at the time of adoption. The gold area was the urban growth boundary that was put into place in 2001. So each city in Williamson County is embarking on a similar process. Some of the municipalities may not propose very many changes, some may. This is a map of the Franklin city limits, which you can see outlined with that dark yellow line. And the urban growth boundary is in that bluish green color. So you can kind of see how much the city has grown over time compared to that previous slide. And you may also notice that the city has started growing out of its urban growth boundary in the Goose Creek area. As part of the Williamson County Growth Plan update, there are about 10 guiding principles that each municipality is kind of considering as they look to revise their boundaries. And I'd like to touch on a few of those. Coordinated growth planning. So we're doing this together. we're working on it. Thompson Station's working on it. Spring Hill's working on it. We want it to be as transparent as possible, which is why we're doing these community meetings. We have the in-person option, the virtual option. They'll be recorded. Future meetings will be listed on the project webpage. Planning horizon of 20 years. The state statute suggests looking at a 20-year kind of period for growth and using that. Other principles accommodate future growth in coordination with the municipality's vision for growth and population forecasts, efficient and fiscally sustainable services, resource protection, creating a regional form for each city. So an example of that might be along our border with Brentwood. There are areas where there may be confusion. If you're in Brentwood, you wonder if you're in Brentwood or Franklin. The boundaries can get a little blurred. Is Costco in Brentwood or Franklin? And it's actually in Brentwood. So those are, issues that we're trying to consider, having kind of a distinctive regional form as we go forward. Focus on growth boundary issues, if any of those arise, and kind of coordinate with each jurisdiction, but also respecting each jurisdiction's local autonomy and history and traditions of planning. And then potentially, as we work through this process, creating some interlocal agreements if those are deemed necessary. At this point in the process, the staff, and I say staff as in Jimmy Wiseman and Brian, so the water department, the engineering department, the planning department, parks, fire, we've all been looking at the UGB, and we've come up with this working draft, and that's what it is, and we want to share that and get feedback on it, and then we can refine the boundary based on that feedback. But the efficient and fiscally sustainable delivery of municipal services has been a big driver of our recommendations, being able to serve areas with water, with sewer, gravity sewer, and taking into consideration our major thoroughfare plan and future street network. In 2016, as part of the Envision Franklin update, a suitability analysis was completed for the entire urban growth boundary. So you see a couple different colors on your screen. The green is the most suitable land for development. The red and orange are the least suitable for development. And the suitability analysis was based on 9 factors, and they were weighted, they're given different weights. So the factors that were weighted heavily, the heaviest, were floodway and floodplain. So if a parcel had more than 50% floodplain, floodway, then it's probably going to end up in red. Areas with steep slopes, generally greater than 20%. And then also areas with stream buffers was weighted, and other considerations were gravity sewer. If gravity sewer was available or kind of within a certain distance. And then proximity to the I-65 corridor, proximity to improved roads and streets were also weighed, but not as heavily. So the topographic constraints in sewer were the biggest factors listed here. So we had this, and we've used this as sort of a guide to get to where we are, but it hasn't been the only thing we've looked at. The suitability analysis informed the Envision Franklin design concepts update. And a lot of those areas that are, quote, least suitable ended up in development reserve, which is that light green color kind of on the periphery of the UGB. The dark green color represent areas of conservation, so generally floodplain and areas with steep slopes. The drainage basins represent a critical way of how staff has viewed the UGB update. And we've taken a drainage basin approach to get to where we are. And we kind of went through, even internally, we had discussions kind of based on each drainage basin. You know, the meeting we're in now is Southwest 1, 2, 3, and 4, which you can see on the map are in the southwest part of the UGB. In 2018, we did an annexation study based on these drainage basins. And it was a time when the annexation laws had recently changed, the state laws, and we were receiving a lot of annexation requests from all over the UGB. At one point, we mapped the properties of property owners who had inquired about annexation, and there are little dots all over the UGB because that became it became a legal reality for property owners to request wherever they are in the UGB. Prior to that, it was they had to be contiguous to the city limits. But when that changed, anybody in the UGB could request annexation. And we were getting a lot of requests, so we undertook this study, and it's based on developable acreage in those basins, future land use, ability to provide services, magnitude of investment. And there's a short, mid, long on this map for each basin. And the short term signifies an area where we anticipate growth or development in the short term, and in which we could respond to that and serve those areas more readily than in the mid and the long. The mid is, you know, maybe there are some parts of the basin, or maybe there is some growth pressure and some developability, like the Mays Creek area is shown as a mid. The long-term areas, all the Southwest basins are shown as long, and that's mainly due to the topographic constraints, a lot of hillsides, steep slopes, also just the inability to provide sewer in a fiscally responsible way, and unimproved county roads, all those factors. So this is the working draft that was sent out. Mailers were sent to property owners who could be impacted by these changes. Properties that were either proposed to be removed or added got a mailer, and we sent out about 1,000. In the Southwest area, we are recommending removal of most of Southwest Basin 1, except for the future McHatcher alignment, where the future McHatcher would come through. We're recommending keeping that area for planning purposes, and then kind of cleaning up some of the parcel lines where you might see the green area. But we'll get into that. So this is just a zoomed in map. The bottom of the screen shows a large property. It actually is, it borders Thompson Station city limits, and the property owner owns that property, and it's split. So to the south, just below that big red piece, the property owner actually owns a tract in Thompson Station, and then owns this tract in the Franklin UGB, and it's right across from Gateway Village. So we are recommending to let that go, and I would anticipate Thompson Station would try and incorporate that into their UGB. But for the most part, Southwest Basin 4, if we go back to this screen, is adjacent to city limits. There are areas that are contiguous to city limits, and it's not an area we anticipate a lot of growth, but we could foresee some extensions of sewer in this area over time. And in Southwest Basins 2 and 3, there are areas that we talked a lot about internally. And, you know, I think there are pros and cons for keeping them or removing them. But at this point, our recommendation is to leave them in the Franklin UGB. And I'm going to let Jimmy Wiseman come up here and talk a little bit about the major thoroughfare plan in this area.
Thanks, Andrew. In 2016, in conjunction with the Envision Franklin update, the city hired a consultant to model the traffic improvement needs for the urban growth boundary in the growth area. And in that study, we looked at the land use and what was potentially to be proposed out there, and what, how many lanes we may need on certain existing roadways and some new connections and new roadways that may or may not need to be built. So through that process, we were able to plan parts of our urban growth boundary from a transportation perspective. As Andrew mentioned, one of the reasons to keep a portion of the Southwest 1 basin in the urban growth boundary is for us to better assist TDOT if and when the southwest quadrant of McCatcher is constructed someday. We spent a lot of time and effort with them on the one that's under construction now, and acquiring right of way and such things. So it's important for us to play a hand in that as we move forward. You'll see a lot of existing roads in this part of the city that really we just envision them to be needing improvements, not necessarily new roads, but also a couple new roads that provide cross connectivity across some existing larger tracks today. Generally speaking, most all of the improvements that are recommended in Connect Franklin in this part of the city and in the urban growth boundary will be driven by development. So the city would not necessarily go forward and widen roadways if they're not needed. And as property develops, we would do traffic studies and really understand what improvements are needed when, what right of way needs to be acquired, and how that moves forward. You'll see some in the green, we have the collector roadways, which are really meant to feed the arterial roadways like a Franklin Road or Lewisburg Pike, Columbia Pike, roads like that. So as we go through this process, we will certainly look to update this plan. If some of the area is removed from the urban growth boundary and remains in the county, then it's not necessary for us to make all of the improvements that we had once envisioned. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian Goodwin to talk sewer.
When we were looking at the urban growth boundary, the proposed areas to remove from the current UGB, like Andrew has mentioned before, the current UGB really went laid along the watersheds. And as you look in Southwest Basin number 1, you can see a lot of that flow, a lot of that watershed breaks back to the west, which makes it very difficult when determining infrastructural requirements when the requests come into our department on how to sewer these without creating a huge capital improvement investment that is really very high cost. And most developers, when they look at this, they back out or they ask to be denied the availability for sewer in these areas. So Southwest 1 fit that same type of criteria. So again, when we were looking at it, we're looking at when we get these requests, can we come up with a capital improvement plan that makes sense? The developers want to invest to expand the orderly system so that we can get it to centralized treatment. And that was kind of our driving factor in determining those lines. When we go to basins 2, 3, and 4, those do break back to the west. We've kept them in there tentatively, not so much that we wanted to from a water management perspective, but there was questions brought up who is better yet to serve the area, us or Thompson Station. And there were requests in those areas in which we did ask for some sewer studies. There were some solutions that could have somewhat been viable, but due to annexation requests not going through, those weren't met. So again, from the perspective of laying out these basins or laying out this future UGB, we were looking what makes sense from an infrastructure improvement, what makes sense when we ask developers to follow our master plan so that we have an orderly expansion of our system, is how we have on our first cut come up with this line.
Thanks, Brian. So to kind of bring it home, we have a few slides left. What does this mean for me? I think a lot of people are probably wondering that. For properties proposed to remain in the Franklin UGB, the potential remains for future annexation into the city. The way things are now, it's at the property owner's request, and which gives the property owner control, but depending on the nature of that request, the city may not be able to serve that one property if it's so far away from existing services and the extension of sewer is not a viable option. But again, these are the UGBs, an area the city could grow into over time. So it's not necessarily meant to mean development's going to happen tomorrow. For properties proposed to be removed from the Franklin UGB, that means removal from Envision Franklin, which is the city's land use plan. And we use the UGB for Envision Franklin and for Connect Franklin. It also means gravity sewer would not be planned to serve this area. The area is to be removed. Williamson County Planning would facilitate a separate planning process to assign future land uses in a different zoning district. Most of the county zoning in the UGB is MGA1, which is a zoning district that's just for properties in the UGB. So I would anticipate the county to facilitate a separate process. There would not be a change in property address or school zoning or taxes really at this point. So the next steps, you'll see the highlighted area. That's kind of where we are now. We had a virtual community meeting, a kickoff meeting on the 12th, of which there is a recording on the project webpage. We had a brief discussion at the August 26th joint conceptual workshop. And then we're doing these community meetings tonight and tomorrow night. We'll have some open office hours on the 24th and the 29th. We'll also have a concise briefing at the joint conceptual workshop on Thursday night, the 23rd, and a presentation at the Board of Mayor and Alderman work session on October 12th. The county is hosting a growth plan symposium on the 19th. It'll be the morning of the 19th at the Enrichment Center. And the steps beyond that have yet to be determined. You know, the point of all of this is to try and build a consensus, try and do our community outreach, kind of fine tune the boundary, create something that the community supports, staff can support, and we feel comfortable turning over to the decision makers. Once the process continues to move on, a coordinating committee will be convened. And once they are officially convened, they have 6 months to adopt a growth plan for the whole county. So we're trying to do as much planning before that time so they can get that done in their 6 months, because that's pretty quick for us. The coordinating committee will hold 2 public hearings, as will each municipality. So the city of Franklin, I would anticipate in early 2022, would hold 2 public hearings, and then the coordinating committee would hold 2 public hearings. So there will be an opportunity for public input. Again, we're doing this early to try and do as much outreach as we can to build a consensus going forward. One way you can help us do that, help everybody, is to take a short survey. There are 4 questions, 3 questions, and then your email address if you desire to do that. You can use the QR code. We have the handouts for those in person, and then you can use that QR code on the screen if you actually hold your phone up to it, or you can click that link, the surveymonkey.com/r/UGB update. And the survey is posted on the project webpage right now. So you can find that link on the project webpage. It's at the bottom of the page. So that's all the material we have. I'd be happy to take questions. We're planning to take any in-person questions first, and then we'll move to our Zoom attendees. Yes, sir.
Yes, I was curious about Jack Hatch and how it
Okay.
comes to, I mean, the map's kind of big. I'm on South Hall Road, and it doesn't look like it's gonna get very close to me, but I'm just curious how where that's coming through. Obviously, we know where it ends at Target. We know where they're kind of finishing right now. Where is that kind of coming through behind Franklin Green, Willow Springs, that kind of thing?
Sure. It is very preliminary at this point. We took a stab at just really looking at topography when we laid this in there and working with TDOT a little bit. There have been no environmental studies done at this time, and it's a long process that TDOT would go through. The city wouldn't move forward with this project. It would be an entirely state run with the assistance of the city. So I can say that, you know, could it shift here or there? Yes. I'm happy to share the information we have in a map. I can email you if that'd be helpful, with some parcel lines on it, maybe easier. But at this point, it certainly could move, and it's very, very preliminary at this time. So I've got my information up here if you'd like to.
Probably quite a few years out before that.
Many, many years out, I would say.
I don't see any other questions. Annette, if you want to enable the chat, and if anybody on Zoom would like to ask any questions, feel free. See a question? Can we get a copy of the studies is the question. And are you referring to which studies are you referring to, sir? Sewer and roadway. We'll put all the information that we have on the project webpage. If there's any more Mac Hatcher information, we'll put that on there as well. Another question came in, how will this affect any major developments in the future? The urban growth boundary, and I'm guessing you're referring to potential projects out in the county. For property in the UGB, for 2 farms. So the question is about 2 farms, and that's in the Thompson Station city limits, and that's outside of our jurisdiction. Their city limits and our UGB do have some shared boundaries in parts, and specifically along 2 farms. But overall, being in the UGB does allow for a shorter process to request annexation. And cities cannot annex in other cities' UGBs. So the city of Franklin cannot annex in Thompson Station's UGB, and Thompson Station cannot annex in Franklin's UGB. So that's something important to note. A question came up, how do we get a map that shows the street names that are in the UGB Franklin? There are a couple different ways you can do that. I believe we have a map on the project webpage that has more street labels and street names. We also have our GIS. We have online digital zoning maps where you can zoom in and turn on different layers and turn off different layers. And then a question came in, are you giving up some of those areas to Thompson Station, I think in zone 2 and zone 3? The only area that is proposed at this point is that southernmost piece that's across from Gateway Village. And I mentioned that the property owner owns property in the Thompson Station city limits and the Franklin UGB. So part of the property is cut. And given the guidance to kind of create a distinctive regional form, we thought that would be a good idea, and to avoid any future hangups with coordination amongst 2 different municipalities for kind of ease of future development. our suggestion and recommendation is to leave that in Thompson, let Thompson Station grab it if they want. Any other questions, comments at this point?
Got one question.
Yes, sir.
In the southwest, I think it was 1 and 2,
Yes, sir.
that sewer basin, is it still gonna require a pump station? I see that on the map, sewer map.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yes, by this master plan, if it's built out this way, it would have to be a regional type pump station to serve the largest areas possible. It would be required in order to facilitate it and make it work.
There's a comment that said, thank you for allowing this opportunity at this stage of the UGB planning. You're very welcome. You know, we strive to have a transparent process. We have open office hours. If any of you all would like to, you know, have a more in-depth conversation about this, this Friday, we'll be in the training room. We'll just be around all day if anybody wants to stop by. And then next week on the 29th, we also have open office hours. So feel free to drop by if you'd like to talk in more detail. There are no more comments. I suppose we can go ahead and wrap up. Just continue to check the project webpage for updated information. Feel free to reach out to myself or Eric Connor or anybody at the planning department. We'll try and get you the best information that we can. There is one more question that came up, and I think it's a water related one. Does the need to construct a large regional pump station mean that it would be dependent on a large project or an anticipated flow of smaller projects? Assuming
of course, when we lay out the master plans, let me say the city of Franklin has been very good at designing large diameter interceptors and, you know, serving the city, which helps prevent any sanitary sewer overflows and gives adequate capacity. So in this case, we try to look at plans of combination of projects. What we don't want is a system where we have many pump stations. I've worked in communities that's had that. And those two communities were on moratoriums from TDEC. And so, you know, to answer your question, we plan it out the best we can. It could be, for instance, like if you look at Ladd Park, it's to the south of us, that was a case where development came in, they had a pump station that was considered temporary, and then an interceptor was run to get them completely on gravity, you know, sometime thereafter. So it depends on the situation, the number of developments. There's a lot of, I guess it would go in to make that final determination.
There's a question about how do we get more information about fiber internet services in more rural areas. I'm not sure about that. Jimmy may have a little more insight.
That would be up to the utility provider. I would recommend, I have the same questions about where I live, and I've not gotten any good responses either. So I would recommend just reaching out to utility provider.
All right, seeing no more questions, we'll go ahead and close up early. Thank you all for attending. Please take the survey, check the project webpage for more information, and feel free to reach out. Thank you all very much.